Welcome to Canine Revolution Radio. Presented by Canine Revolution Dog Training, enhancing the dog and owner relationship through education, balance, and pack instinct.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Canine Revolution Radio. We're honored today to have Blair with us from All Is Well in Summerville. She's an expert in dog and canine nutrition and cat nutrition, right?
Yeah. I'm a lot better with dog nutrition, but I can do cat nutrition too.
There you go.
So yeah.
So nutritional expert. So Blair, give us a little bit about your background and tell us a little bit about the store in Summerville. We'll touch more about that at the end of the podcast before we start going through some of our conversation. But give us a background, your expertise, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So I actually went to school to be a veterinary technician. So I have a degree, a license in veterinary technician, or in technology, I should say. But now for the last 11 years, I've been working at All Is Well, and I've been doing the nutrition part of the store where we have clients come in and we talk about what their ailments are as far as their pets are concerned, whether it be skin problems, organ damage or failure, things like Cushing's, Addison's, diabetes, you name it, we talk about it, we go over it. We try to direct the clients along with their veterinarian. We try to make sure that it's a very symbiotic relationship. Where we kind of help the clients ask the right questions of their veterinarians, get on a better diet that might help their disease process or condition or what have you, and kind of go from there. We have a really good success rate with that. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. We're going to talk some of the specific stuff, some of the most common ones that I know of, at least just from being at the store, talking to people that go there, sending a lot of people your way. But nutrition is a big deal, when it comes to dogs, because like you already talked about, these things that are happening, just like with us, we can link it back to the nutrition. So I want to deep dive on that today.
Yeah.
I know you got your note card, so
yes,
feel free to break out, make sure we got everything covered that we need to talk about.
Perfect.
But first, what I want to go into is the basics of canine nutrition. What should dog owners be looking at? What should they be considering? I don't know if it's protein intake, fat intake, I don't know, carb intake, like grains, what are the basics that people should be thinking about when it comes to their dog's nutrition?
Absolutely. Whenever I talk about nutrition, I like to look at it from an ancestral standpoint. For instance, my breed is Siberian Huskies. With Siberian Huskies, specifically in the show ring, because I show dogs as well, I have a lot of breeders who have been doing it longer than I have, who come on will ask me, well, don't you like your dogs on chicken? Well, honestly, no, I don't like my dogs on chicken, because if we think of it from an ancestral standpoint, this specific breed was not raised on chicken. We didn't have, native tribes that had farmland. They weren't, they didn't have chickens. They moved around a lot. They did, fish and red meats, things like that, whale, seal. That's what they did. So I like to look at nutrition for dogs and cats as a whole from an ancestral standpoint. For instance, there's always a lot of debate in the dog world. Are dogs carnivores or are they omnivores? Technically, they're omnivores, but I don't think that they thrive on a vegetable-dense diet.
Right.
Dogs as a whole have a shorter GI than we do, so they don't digest plant matter nearly as efficiently as we digest plant matter. The cell wall of plant matter is very hard to digest. For instance, corn, that's one of those things. Corn, in order for it to be digested properly, it needs to be chewed. It needs to simmer around in the gastric juices. They got to regurgitate it. If we're thinking about cows, ruminants. So they regurgitate, they chew it some more, they swallow it, it simmers in the gastric juices. They do that several times. And then it goes through the remaining 3 chambers of the stomach, out the intestines before it is a cow patty. So, for instance, we can't digest corn. There's really no reason we should have it in their food. Science Diet and other companies, they like to say that corn's a great source of plant protein, but it really isn't if they can't digest it well.
Right.
But back to the whole ancestral thing, wild dogs, wolves, other wild canines in the wild, what they're doing is, we have a lot of people that say, well, they eat plant matter, they eat the plant matter in the digestive tract and whatnot. But do they really? When wolves are consuming a kill, they aren't just eating the intestines and the stomach. They're actually shaking it. They're ripping it. They're tearing it. The plant matter that they get out of it is very minute if we think of it in that aspect.
Yeah.
So I do think that dogs need some vegetation in their diet. I think that it's good that they have some of that because it helps with fiber and whatnot. And then there are different enzymes and vitamins in the plant matter that are beneficial to dogs. But I don't think that... Personally, I don't think, and if you think of it from an ancestral standpoint,
right,
dogs should not be eating plant-based diets. They should not be eating, a diet that is made up majorly of plant matter. I think it should be nice, healthy meats, some good lean fat, or lean meats with some healthy fats. You have to have a certain amount of fat to digest protein.
Right.
Grains. There's a lot of debate right now in the nutrition community about grains. I don't think they're a necessity personally. I think for some dogs do better on it, some dogs don't.
Yeah.
I think we should feed each dog as they come to us, not each dog as, a whole.
So treat the dog as an individual.
Absolutely.
Figure out what works best for your dog.
Absolutely.
And go with that.
Yep.
Right. And that's where you and the whole All Is Well crew come in.
Yep.
You help to pinpoint that out for people. But
Absolutely.
I think that's great talking about primarily focusing on the meat, going
Absolutely.
back to the ancestry. We talk about that a lot. The dog's ancestor is the wolf. If you look at dogs in the wild, what are they doing? What are the wolves doing? So hit the nail on the head with that one as far as, being on the same page about that. But I know we're going to go into some more details on specific diets, specific foods, stuff like that.
Right.
But if someone's out there just, in general, basically looking at, what should I be getting for my dog? You want it a primarily meat-based, food.
Absolutely.
And then, some vegetables, some grains are okay, but we'll deep dive on that in a little bit. But we want to look for a food source that's primarily
meat.
Meat,
Yep.
right?
Meat is king when it comes to dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
And majorly with cats, truthfully. Cats
Yeah.
are what they call obligate carnivores. They have to have meat. They have to be able to get the meat and the organ matter so that they can get taurine out of the food.
Gotcha.
If they can't get that, they can go blind, they can die. So
holy cow.
dogs, yes. Cats, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. Did you guys have anything on that topic or that point you wanted to ask about or bring up? No? Good to go? It's a lot of information, so be ready, guys. Be ready.
And I word vomit a lot. So.
And that's what we like. All right. So, most people are going to be feeding kibble diets. Can you talk real quick about kibble versus raw?
Absolutely.
And we'll go deeper into the raw stuff later, but give us a quick overview, kibble versus raw. What are the pros and cons?
Oh, yeah. So definitely raw is food in its most natural state, and it's going to be the easiest to break down. Most of the time when you're looking at a raw diet, it's predominantly meat. Most of the time, if you're looking at the commercial diets, anywhere from 80 to 95% meat. The other, percentage is going to be vegetable matter, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, if that particular company adds that. Now, you can do your own raw diet as well, which takes a lot more finesse.
Oh, yeah.
But it is my opinion and the opinion of the store as a whole that the raw diet is definitely the best diet out there for dogs. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all going to go for it.
Right.
Dogs are like people. They don't like textures. Maybe they don't want their food cold.
Right.
They're not going to like beef. Maybe they like fish better. And we'll see those sorts of things with kibble as well. Kibble is one of those things that's it's more of a convenience. So we tend to have a lot of people who either can't devote the time or the funds or the energy to raw feeding. And that's fine. I'm not going to say that they're bad pet owners because they do that, because they're not.
Yeah.
They're trying to do the best that they can with what they have available.
Yeah.
But I definitely think a raw diet is better than a kibble diet. But a good quality, high meat, lower carbohydrate kibble diet is better than, say, Kibbles and Bits or some of the other.
Old Roy.
Yeah, right? Yes.
Gravy Train, good to go?
Absolutely. Oh, gosh. My dad did put water on Gravy Train one time when I was little and ate it. So.
You got to do what you got to do.
Good to go. Nothing wrong with that. But, yeah, that again touches going back to the ancestral roots. That's what the wolves are eating.
Yep.
But, human intervention in dog breeding, as you know, because you've dealt with your huskies a lot and done that. But you also see the other breeds out there as well. Human intervention has changed or evolved a lot of the dog stuff, so that's where a lot of that kibble comes from. It's easier, obviously, to handle the kibble, because handling raw,
certainly,
whole nother thing. Plus, you may have to put supplements or stuff in there too to help out whatever your dog's going through. But we'll talk about
second mortgage.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth?
Refinance, yeah.
Right.
We'll go back into detail on raw here in a little bit, but we're just trying to touch the overview with that one.
Certainly.
But 100% raw better than kibble for most dogs, but again, individuals. Every dog's an individual.
Absolutely.
And if your dog goes out in your yard and starts munching on the grass, they're getting in their veggies, so you know you're good to go.
Fiber.
Good to go. All right, so talking about kibble diet specifically, you know, we got different sized dogs. We got dogs that do different things.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about, and let's just assume right now that someone's using a high quality kibble like From or a Kana or Stella and Chewy or whatever. Let's say that they got the high quality kibble. What portion sizes should they be looking at in general for their, you know, various dogs? Maybe a small dog, medium dog, large dog. You know?
So with a higher quality kibble, you're going to feed a lot less because the food's more nutrient dense. The whole days of feeding, you know, 4 cups a day to a 25-pound dog with these specific diets are gone. And we have a lot of people that it's hard to convert them from that sort of thing. They're used to, you know, Big Mac, supersize me, all that good stuff. We're like, listen, bring it on down a little bit.
Well, let's pause right there real quick. That's a big issue because a lot of the dogs we deal with, they come into training, but they're in for training and weight loss.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You know, that's something that a lot of people struggle with because they're just feeding their dog. Their dog's eating, so they just keep feeding it.
Oh, yes.
He's still hungry, man. He just keeps eating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They don't realize that, you know, that weight is going to reduce the dog's length of life, reduce longevity,
absolutely,
impact their joints in a negative way, have other health effects as well.
Yep.
You know, so going back to portion sizes, you know, what should we be assuming we're on a very high quality kibble diet?
Absolutely. So say we're dealing with like I'll use my dog's 12-pound dachshund or 10 to 12-pound dachshund on something like a Kana, Stella and Chewy's From. We're looking at a half a cup total for the day. And for some of those dogs, we're going to shake it off. And my big thing is I tell people, do not eyeball it. Use a measuring scoop. The Dollar Tree has measuring cups galore. Go and get you one. Put your specific, you know, ration in there, and then that's what you use every time.
Yeah.
A bigger dog, say, one of my girls is 45 pounds. She gets about a cup, maybe a cup and a quarter a day. And we kind of have to eyeball her weight. She tends to be one that gains weight a little more easily.
Okay.
She's 8 now, so we really have to watch it with her.
Right.
The biggest one that I have had was my 55-pound male, and he only got a cup and a half a day, 3/4 of a cup morning and evening.
Yep.
And that kept him nice and lean. And honestly, for an 11-pound dog, we didn't have joint issues or anything like that.
Yep.
I do think there's something to be said about keeping the dogs nice and lean, like you said. There are certain breeds that have more ailments, like pit bulls. Pit bulls, bully breeds, they have crap knees, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
So the heavier the dog is, the more strain it's putting on the knees, not just the bone itself, but the ligaments, the tendons, the musculature. The CCL and ACL ruptures are probably one of the biggest things that we see on those breeds.
That's the most common in the pit bulls.
Absolutely.
And that's to the $4,000 right there for
per
one
leg.
knee. You
Yes.
know, one knee.
Right.
So,
They say as soon as one goes,
the other one's going
right.
to go.
So keep your
Well,
dog
there's
in
more strain
shape.
on it,
Right.
you know? But and then we'll see labs that are, you know, and I don't like to say morbidly obese because it hurts people's feelings, but they are.
Yeah,
You know, one of the things that I do at work is talk about body condition. And I tell people, let's not worry about the number on the scale as much as we're worrying about what your dog looks like.
Right.
So, you know, I tell people dogs need to have a nice hourglass figure. If you're looking at them from the top and from the shoulders to the hips, they're nice and straight, or they bulge out, your dog's too heavy. You need to work on that. You need to be able to feel the ribs, feel the intercostal space, not just, you know, we don't necessarily want to see the ribs. Now, some of the veterinary guidelines have changed a little bit, and they want to see those ribs. I'm not big on that because then we don't have like any cushion just in case we get sick or anything like that. But I do want to see a nice lean dog. I think that's really important. These animals are athletes. You know, they're not, you know, maybe the Shih Tzus aren't athletes, but they
I've seen some Shih Tzus get after
right?
it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But a lot of these breeds that we deal with on a daily basis were athletes. They were bred to do something. So really, just keeping them chunky isn't doing them any service at all.
And I guess we also need to take into it, and we're talking about generally what most pet owners are doing with their dog. Now, if we have someone that's more active, maybe they're running with their dog or they're hiking and their dog's doing strenuous exercise or heavy training, they might need to up that a little bit.
Absolutely. I always tell people up it by no more than like an eighth to a quarter of a cup per meal.
Okay.
And if we're still losing, then up it a little bit more, but give it a few days. It's just like with people. We eat a big heavy meal. We're not necessarily going to be 10 pounds heavier the next day, but we need to just keep a steady eye on it. I have some people that'll double the dog's food if the dog's looking a little thin. Well, then they get fat in a month or so, and then we're back right to where we started.
Yep.
So no more than an eighth to a quarter of a cup per meal.
Okay.
To increase to, or even decrease. So I have a lot of people that come in and that's just too little amount of food.
Yeah.
So I tell them, okay, start with this. But if we're seeing, weight gain, or if we're not losing, let's cut it back by an eighth of a cup per meal or a quarter cup per meal.
Yeah.
That usually makes them feel a little bit better. Because I think a lot, especially in the South, I feel like that food bowl is linked to love.
Yep.
So
we got that comfort food down here. We're good to go.
That's right.
What about people that say, my dog's still hungry? I feed them. They're still, because the lab, they'll not stop eating.
You bought a lab, you bought a bottomless pit. That's one of my
what do you say to people that are like, hey, they're still hungry? They're still hungry.
What I tell people is, think of it this way. Most of us have had children. Grace just did it to me not too terribly long before we came. Mommy, I'm hungry. She's had lunch.
Yep.
I know she's not hungry. She's bored.
Yeah.
Either the dog's bored.
Yeah.
Or and sometimes when we're changing portions, the dog will feel hungry. If you're eating, say, this much food, and we've cut that ration in half, the body says, oh my gosh, there's a void. We have to tell the brain. The brain says you're hungry, so you'll fill that void.
Right.
It's natural survival mechanisms.
Right.
But if they're still hungry and they're not losing weight or they're gaining weight, they're not hungry. They're just being gluttonous like we are.
Right.
So,
Gotcha.
And some people need to hear that a little more bluntly than others. But, a lot of times you can kind of make people understand that it's not that they're hungry. It's just something that they've been conditioned to feel as well.
Right.
So.
Absolutely.
That's one of the hardest things in the dog world is explaining the misconceptions that have been reinforced just years and years and years. As we progress, it seems like more people have dogs than they have kids. So kind of replacing it at that point. They're my kids. I love them. I want to do this.
Absolutely.
Definitely got to do what's in their best interests.
Absolutely.
And then also pushing our human emotions and the way we think onto the dog. They're hungry, they need food.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
A lot of humans operate like that too, you know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
We need to make sure we're regulating, and that's why I like to talk about it's for your dog's best health and well-being.
Yep.
To keep them lean and in shape, because joint issues, longevity. I want my dogs to live as long as possible.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Diabetes is another thing that long term, if dogs remain overweight, we've been seeing just at the shop an increase of dogs with diabetes, thyroid problems, cushingoid symptoms, or Cushing's itself.
We'll talk a little bit about those little, so a dog overweight can develop these, and how does that affect the dog?
Absolutely. It's just like with people, long-term overweight long-term we do tend to see more dogs that have diabetes. Usually it's that there's too much glucose in the system over time, and so the body either can't regulate the glucose or it stops making its own glucose. So we see things like that. I think a lot of times diabetes and hypothyroidism or Cushing's go hand in hand.
Okay.
And I'm not quite exactly sure why that is, I'll be honest there.
Right.
But we do see that a lot, and a lot of the symptoms are the same. So, if you have a diabetic dog, you're usually going to see an increased thirst, increased urination. You'll sometimes see that with a thyroid patient or a Cushing's patient as well. We'll see weight gain sometimes with diabetes. If it goes on long enough, then the owners aren't recognizing that there's a problem with like the excessive thirst, excessive urination. You could see rapid, sudden weight loss, and that's usually a telltale sign. You'll see things like cataracts form due to diabetes and things like that. So there's all sorts of just being overweight. It's kind of like like dominoes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you just tick that one domino, and then all of these other health problems come with it.
Right, which is going to be, impacting your budget, you know
Absolutely,
what I'm saying? Because
God,
you're
yes.
having to work your dog through all this stuff, but also back to longevity. We all love our dogs. We want our dogs to be with us as long as possible, and we're not setting ourselves up or our dogs up for that if we're feeding them unhealthily or that kind of stuff.
I agree.
And that's
Quality
another
of
reason.
life.
That's another reason to have quality food too.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? To the best of
Absolutely.
your ability.
Yep.
All right, so we'll get off that soapbox. Let's talk about. Now that we're talking about quality of life, giving your dog, the best diet possible, to your ability. Not everybody's able to afford that raw diet. Not everybody's able to, handle that raw diet or something like that. But let's talk about kibble diets because that's the easiest for most people. What are your top 3 recommended kibble diets, and why are they your top 3?
Absolutely. So a lot of times my recommendations go, again, based on the individual. But I find that the brands that I recommend the most are Acana, From, and Stella & Chewy's. Now, another one that I've liked recently is called Essence. And I know you only asked for 3, but I like Essence as the limited ingredient recipe kind of fell into our laps during that whole DCM debacle that they had. And I like it because it's limited ingredient, it's high meat, there's no lentils, peas, potatoes, anything like that. That's another reason why I like Acana. With the exception of their newly formulated limited ingredient line. They're a grain-free, potato-free company, so we have a lot of dogs that have grain intolerance issues. And now some vets will tell you that they can't possibly be allergic to grains. That's not exactly true because there is protein in grain. So if corn is an excellent source of plant protein and there's pea protein, then obviously the pets could be allergic to the proteins in those too. I mean, we see people who have peanut allergies, and that's not a meat, but there's protein in that peanut. So it's highly possible with dogs as well. But what we typically see with those things are like skin issues, yeastiness, things like that, and those carbohydrates will really feed into that. So I really like Acana and Origin. Acana and Origin are sister companies, so they're kind of synonymous. But I like them because they're really good for those specific dogs. Now, From is a wonderful company. They've been around since 1904, and they were the company that pioneered the whole idea of a complete and balanced bag of dog food, and I think that's really cool. They've been like I said, open since 1904. They've been owned by the same family since the day they opened their doors, and they're continually grooming their teenagers to take over. So this isn't a company that's going to sell out to like one of the big name brand companies, and then everything's going to change like it has with every other company that's ever been bought out. So I really like that about them. And specifically with them is they have, and Acana and Origin have done this too, where they have a grained version. They've introduced some wholesome grains into some of their foods. But with From, they have a grain-friendly line, and then they have a grain-free line. Now, a lot of my small, picky dogs, like your Shih Tzus, Chihuahuas, Cavaliers, things like that, they do really well on that grain-free line because it adds the possibility to do some rotation feeding. So you have 9 different flavors, I think it is, in the grain-free repertoire, and you can literally switch between the different flavors at every meal if you wanted to. So if you've got a small dog that, we've cut down on the ration, we know we're feeding an appropriate amount, but the dog is just picky, that's really nice for them. You can switch it up more readily than some of the other brands out there. Stella & Chewy's is another brand that you can do that with, and what I like about them is their kibble is all baked. So there's a difference between baked and extruded kibbles, and extruded kibbles are usually baked at a quicker, or much more quickly and at higher temperatures, whereas the baked kibbles are slow and low over a long period of time. So a lot of times that kind of holds in your nutrient panels and the flavor.
So pause right there because I want people to. So we got baked, and then we have what's
extruded is another word, which it's still baked, it's just higher temperatures, shorter period of time.
So the baked is better for preserving nutrients as a whole.
It is.
But extruded still gets that good nutrient in there.
Absolutely.
Just on the level of the baked.
Exactly.
Now
the baked companies will tell you that extruded is not great and vice versa.
They're trying to sell it and all that.
Absolutely. It's a marketing ploy. But I think they're if you look at the good companies, either or are fine. But Stella & Chewy's, you can also switch up between the different protein sources a little more readily, so that really helps with picky dogs or just owners that want to give their dogs more variety. That's one thing that we try to teach at the store is variety is the spice of life. If all dogs were wild and they were all out catching their own food, they wouldn't be eating chicken every day. They wouldn't be eating fish every day.
Yeah.
So variety is really good because you get different nutrients out of different protein sources and different arrays of vitamins and minerals. Or different arrays of vitamins and minerals from different vegetable sources and whatnot too.
Now I know Stella and Chewy's has their kibble. They also have like a raw blend with the freeze-dried raw.
Yep,
Does
they
that
certainly
help
do.
someone get a little bit of the, like, I don't know the difference between a freeze-dried raw and like a raw that you have to keep in your fridge?
Right. So
you know?
nutrient-wise, there's no difference. So with Stella and Chewy's, what they do is they actually, whatever they make for their frozen raw diets, it's the same exact thing in the freeze-dried. It's just there's an extra step to where it's shelf-stable.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly the whole freeze-dried process, but I know that it's in the freezer for long periods of time until pretty much all of the moisture is removed.
Okay.
But nutrient-wise, it's the same. Now, sometimes with the freeze-dried stuff, you have to feed just a little bit more. Price-wise, and I think because it goes through an extra step, I feel like you feed, sorry, I messed up.
No, you're good.
I feel like with the Stella and Chewy's, their freeze-dried versus their frozen, I think that your price is going to be a little bit more on the freeze-dried because
Right.
there is that extra
More
step.
processing or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like to say that it's processed because
Right.
people hear that word and it's just like organic or natural. You know, motor oil is organic, so not everything that's labeled organic you can really
Yeah.
trust that. But
Right.
but for the most part, yes, it's the raw is less processed. With the freeze dried is a little more processed, but still not in a way that I would say it's bad.
So that Stella and Chewy raw blend where it has the kibble and the freeze-dried pieces, are we really getting more nutrients out of that? That's better for the dog, or is it about the same, or what? You know,
I
does it
think
make a
so.
big difference?
I think they kind of test everything, so everything has that guaranteed analysis so that you're getting, the vitamins and minerals and at the levels that they want you to have as far as the AFCO is concerned. So I think nutrient-wise, it's all about the same, but I do think that because even freeze-dried raw is a little more digestible, I think you get more digestibility or more what I like to say bioavailability from the freeze-dried than you are going to be getting from the kibble.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So from Akana,
Stella and Chewy's,
and then Essence.
and I like Essence. It's one of those foods we don't always recommend often, but for specific cases it works well.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So now we've talked some of the best kibbles.
Yep.
What are some of the worst kibbles that people, they may not even know?
Right.
They just go to PetSmart, they pick out a random food. Like, what are some of the worst ones, and why are they the worst ones?
Definitely. So definitely Old Roy.
Oh, really?
Yep. Gravy
That's the
train.
Walmart brand, ain't it?
Pretty much.
That's what my dogs grew up eating when I was a kid.
Yeah. Ours too, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I've seen dogs that have lived a long life on that stuff
yeah.
too.
Dude, Rambo was in his mid-20s when he died.
Well, and I think the foods nowadays are like the Old Roy, the Purina, the Pedigree. I think what we have nowadays is not what it used to
Right.
be. Don't you do that. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So I think like the Pedigrees, the Purinas from long ago were probably much better foods than what we are now, because now these companies are all about, well, how much
Making
money
money.
can I make
Yeah.
off of it? So how can I pad my bank account?
Right.
And I know that makes me sound very cynical and whatnot, but I mean,
No.
honestly, when it comes to dog food, I am.
Yeah.
I'll be
Good to
honest.
go.
I'll own that.
I feel like there's a lot more competition now too.
Oh, God,
not as many
yes.
people were into it until this latest
yeah.
generation that's
Oh,
dog
absolutely.
obsessed.
Because dogs are our babies
Right.
now, so we want the best for our babies.
Right.
I agree, but definitely I try to stay away. My rule of thumb is if it's in Walmart, the grocery store, or a big box store, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be one of the best. Now, that's not to say that you can't find good foods at, say, PetSmart, Petco, things like that. But they also have to appeal to the masses. And there are a lot of people who don't know about better nutrition and pet foods.
Yeah.
So, of course, they're not, if they see this, $80 bag of dog food compared to this $25 bag of, $25 a 40-pound bag of pedigree that's $25. So of course they're going to go for that one over this $80 bag that they think that they're going to feed the same amount to.
Oh yeah, they both say dog food, so
Absolutely.
we're just like, oh okay.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know?
And the feeding recommendations in the back are pretty much all the same regardless of the breed, because AFCO sets that. Yeah. Now, what I tell my clients, and I'm sorry, I promise I'll circle it back around.
No, you're good.
But what I tell my clients is that the back of that bag of dog food does not. It's not giving you an accurate representation of what you're going to feed your dog. At least not with the foods we feed. Now, maybe like if you're looking at the Old Roy, the Pedigree, the Purinas, yes, you're probably going to feed what they say, and maybe even a little bit more on the back of the bag, but not with foods like Fromicana, Stella and Chewy's, and
the
things
high
like
density nutrient.
Absolutely. But I tell my clients, stay away from Old Roy, stay away from Purina, Pedigree. Some other well-known foods that people look at as good foods. Blue Buffalo, Taste of the Wild. I tell people stay away from those as well, especially in the state of South Carolina when it comes to Taste of the Wild, in my opinion. That's the plant that's always had the recall issues, and I just don't feel it's a safe food. That's why we don't offer it at work. Our bosses are very strenuous at looking at ingredient panels, who makes what food and whatnot, and if it's made by Purina, Taste or Diamond. Diamond makes Taste of the Wild. Diamond makes Kirkland, Nature's Domain. They private label a lot of foods for a lot of different companies. It's just not a safe food to go with. So as far as ingredients, definitely no Purina, no Pedigree. Science Diet is one that I don't like. I'll be honest. They taught my nutrition course.
Really?
I think it's a little unethical that big name brand companies are teaching nutrition courses for vet techs and veterinary professionals. They stand to gain something by teaching these students about nutrition, and then these students recommending their foods later on.
Right, of course. That's everywhere.
Most of the vets will recommend a Science Diet.
Absolutely.
Like
Science Diet and Royal Canin, those are probably the number one and number two recommended down here. I know that IAMS has a veterinary food, Purina has a veterinary food, and they also have teaching schools that teach the vet students. I'm not big fans of those. Yes, some of them have their, some of the prescription foods have their places, but I don't think prescription foods are ever meant to be 100% fed all of the time.
Right.
So
I know when I was starting out, Bane, my Doberman, when he was a puppy, we were like, we're going to go get him the best food. We got him Blue Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
And he was having bad diarrhea pretty much his whole life until, we started meeting with, we moved over here. We started coming to y'all's store, and then we got him on different food, and now, he's got good GI, good digestion. You can see that through his poop, what I'm saying?
The proof is in the poop.
But
I know it's weird, but yes,
all the
time. We look at poop a lot, and that's, being a woman and men and not just men, but women too, coming in, I'm like, okay, let's talk about the poop. It's weird, but we have to do that because what we're outputting, that kind of tells us what we need to be inputting.
Right.
Yeah.
So backing it up a little bit, let's talk about Blue Buffalo for a second. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but Blue Buffalo, like, what are some of the key things that they're doing that we don't like?
Certainly
involving our dog's nutrition and health, what I'm saying?
Several years ago they admitted in a court of a couple of years ago they admitted in a court of law that they do in fact use byproducts in their food, even though that's one of their big things that they use on their commercials and for advertising, that if you love your dog you won't feed them byproducts. They admitted that they do. I mean, in the term byproduct, you kind of have to look at that too. You good? Okay. Because byproducts are things like tendons, and when we think byproducts, we think feet, beaks, feathers, things like that. But then we want our dogs to chew on cow hooves and bully sticks and things like that. The big argument with byproducts is byproducts are not always 100% digestible. So it's a nice way to kind of falsely or bulk up or pad your protein and whatnot, but it's not necessarily going to be 100% soluble to the dog. I'm not planning on my dogs eating bully sticks or chicken feet or things like that as their main meal source. But it's great for them to chew on them. So when they put things like that in the food as their main source of food of protein,
that's an issue.
It's not completely honest.
Right.
And that's been my biggest issue with Blue Buffalo. That and their little Life Source bits. I just think they're ridiculous, honestly. That's their
good
their
selling point.
Well, it's their vitamin and mineral pack essentially.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, nobody else has these Life Source bits. Well, yeah, because everybody else is smart enough to mix it in with the food.
Right.
You know, because dogs will pick those out, and they're either eating all of the vitamins and minerals and not any of the other stuff, or they're eating none of them, so you're going to have deficiencies. It's just you don't give a dog a choice in the bowl, otherwise they're not always going to choose all of it, you know.
Right.
They're going to choose what tastes the best to them.
Yeah.
So
what about Purina? I've heard a lot of people say, vets too, like, hey, you know, Purina has a staff of nutritionists that are studying their formulas and doing this and that.
Every company does.
They do? They all have
every
that?
company
really?
has
Are they say that, or they
no,
what's the deal?
Dang,
They
even
don't.
Old Roy?
Well, I don't know about
I figured Old Roy was like a guy in his
Keep
garage.
going back to
you know?
Old
He
Roy
got the
and
online
Gravy Train.
certification.
maybe not that one, but like most of your big name brand companies do have veterinarians and chemists and stuff that sit on their board of directors, and they're all going over these foods to say, okay, you know what, this is a good panel, this is going to meet the needs. They all have to jump through hoops when it comes to AFCO and stuff. So this whole adage of saying, you know, just the big four are the good ones to go with because they have science behind them.
Yeah.
They all run tests. Acana was one of the biggest ones out there. Acana and Origin, their company name is Champion Pet Foods. They were one of the biggest ones out there that was actually going against this whole DCM thing. To be truthful, they all have legal teams and everything.
Yeah.
So to say that they have that you know, the Purinas and stuff have vets sitting on. They all do. You can't make a food legally. You're not going to be able to make a food and not have a vet look at it and say, okay, what do you think about this? Because the minute you put that food out there that you're selling it, you're opening yourself up for legal
But basically
issues.
all these companies are doing the same thing, having a lot of byproduct in the food.
Pretty much,
You know,
yes.
especially the cheaper foods will have the coloring in there.
Oh God, yes.
You know, all
And
that kind of stuff.
We've seen dyes cause that there's a definite link between dyes and cancer. There is a definite link. We're seeing it in people now with corn and inflammation in the joints and things like that. Just like with celiac disease and things like that. And people, we don't necessarily see celiac disease in dogs, but we see issues that would be congruent with that sort of diagnosis. So,
Gotcha.
So yes, they're using byproducts. They're using things that aren't super digestible. They're using corn, which again, like I said before, there's really no ethical reason corn should be in pet food.
Are they using it
can't
like a
digest
filler,
it.
or are they just using it? Yeah,
Pretty much, as
filler.
a Science Diet has published on their website that corn is an excellent source of plant protein.
Okay.
It's not an excellent source of plant protein if they can't break it down and use it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that the dyes, the synthetic preservatives, like in foods like Old Roy and Pedigree, you're gonna have like the red number 40, and you're gonna have BHT and BHA and ethoxyquin. All of those are chemical preservatives that have been proven to cause cancer.
Gotcha.
We're seeing dogs live longer now, so we're starting to see more problems. Cancer is one of them. I just had a dog that we lost due to cancer, prostate cancer. So we do see that.
Right.
Now, am I going to say that it's because of what he was fed? No, because that dog was fed good food from the day I brought him home.
Right.
But it does make you wonder, what was in the other lines? I'm not going to blame his breeder or anything for that. But, you know, it makes you wonder, well, what could we have done to prevent that? And definitely those dyes and stuff, if I would have fed him that, I almost can imagine what would have been, you know, worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Gotcha. So basically those big companies that you're seeing, they're putting a lot of byproducts, a lot of fillers in there.
Yep. Cheaper ingredients.
Absolutely. I see, you know, back when we were, before we even met you guys, you know, we were doing the Blue Buffalo, Bane's having diarrhea. We're like, why? And it's like bad every time. And it's like, why is this happening? So we tried to do some research on the internet, you know, like any dog owner does. And we were like, okay, maybe it's chicken. So we switched from the chicken Blue Buffalo to the beef Blue Buffalo, but the beef Blue Buffalo still has chicken in it.
Yep.
you know.
And that happens a lot.
So they're just putting chicken in it all, you know,
right?
To
Yep.
fill
And you
it.
don't see a whole lot of protein-specific foods in like the big box stores and whatnot. Some of them, yes. Some of them are limited ingredient diets, and they try to limit the protein sources. But even with those limited ingredient diets, you don't see them limit the carbohydrate content sometimes, or the carbohydrates that they're putting in it.
Gotcha.
So, but no, I agree with you. That's a big problem with pet food. They're trying to decrease the amount of money they're putting into the food so that they can increase the amount of money they're getting out of the food, and they'll start to use chicken, and that's where the chicken byproduct comes in.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot cheaper to use that than it is to use the actual nice lean muscle meat.
Right.
So
they might put the beef in there to meet their requirement to say that it's beef,
beef. Yep.
based or whatever, and then fill it with the chicken or
Absolutely.
whatever. So
Absolutely.
Anyway, all right, so now that we talked about the kibbles a little bit, we've got a lot of big brands out there that are using fillers, things that aren't the highest quality for our dogs, stuff
Absolutely.
like that. Let's talk about some of the most common food allergies or allergies in general that we can use nutrition to help our dog overcome that. So what are some of those?
Absolutely. So what we see the most at the shop is skin allergies. Now, what we try to do is determine what those skin allergies may be from. So a lot of times that's looking at what food they're feeding and making, small changes at first, and sometimes going on to larger changes later on. A lot of times I will see dogs come in that might be on the Purina or Olroy or something like that, and our first thing is to get them off of the corn and the wheat, because corn, as we've learned with humans, is very inflammatory, and wheat tends to be inflammatory as well. So what we do is we remove that first. Everything in the store that we sell is corn and wheat free, so that's usually a safe zone for any of our clients that may have a corn or wheat allergy. Now, sometimes we have to take it a little further and get rid of all grains. And that would be the good grains, or what we consider good grains: rice, oatmeal, barley, things like that. Sometimes we have to take it a step further and remove the potato, because sometimes with that yeast, it's more the carbohydrates that are feeding the yeast. I often use the whole moonshine analogy when we are making, and I say when I don't make moonshine. There was this one time, but when you make moonshine, you're either using corn or sugar or something like that. The carbohydrates is what feeds the yeast. We don't necessarily use, bacon or anything to make moonshine. So we want to try to stifle off the overproduction of the yeast as much as possible by reducing the amount of carbohydrates in the food, or the inflammatory carbohydrates. Morgan, my eldest Siberian that I lost this year, he was actually allergic to rice, believe it or not. And for him, it was not an itchy thing, it was a diet thing. If we fed the dog whole rice, it came out whole the other end, and it caused diarrhea with him. He also had a chicken allergy. So chicken, protein allergies, I usually see more as generalized itching, not we don't necessarily see like the yeast and the ear issues and the chewing the feet like we do with the carbohydrate problems. So we will oftentimes, with the dogs that are just coming in and they're itchy, so we'll change up their protein sources a little. My favorite thing to go to is fish. Not a whole lot of dogs are allergic to fish, and it feeds the skin so nicely.
Right.
So even if we don't stay on fish long term, I think when they're having issues, it's nice to go ahead and put them on fish, and then even maybe later on move to a different protein source. Oftentimes, we do start removing chicken first, because that is the most prevalent protein allergy that there is, but it's not always the most prevalent allergy. We just had a client come in. We've been trying to help her since she got her dog, and I want to say the dog either has just turned a year old or just turned 2 years old. I want to say it was just turned a year old. But we started off, her vet didn't want her to go on a grain-free. I'm like, okay. But her vet said, let's get you off of chicken. So we put her on a pork-based food. They didn't want her on chicken. They didn't want her on beef, because beef is the second most prevalent protein allergy.
Really? Okay.
So we went to a pork-based food. The dog wasn't getting any better. So we finally did talk to her, and we moved her over to a grain-free pork-based food. Dog still got a little bit better, but still wasn't 100%. So they finally did allergy testing, and the whole time that the vet's been saying, no, must be getting chicken, it's chicken, it's chicken. Dog's not even allergic to chicken. That's actually the best protein source for that dog to be on.
Really?
But it was allergic to venison, was allergic to pork, it was allergic to lamb.
Oh, gosh.
It was allergic to rice. So our whole going grain-free was definitely a plus, but the pork was what was doing it for this poor dog.
Gotcha.
So that's what we kind of do. Is it's more of a process of elimination with what we do. We start with the most prevalent allergens and then kind of move other things away from there.
Gotcha.
But what I feel like I see most is probably a carbohydrate or grain intolerance issues.
That's going to be the first thing you try to take care of.
That's what I look at first, you know, whether it be, like I said, if they're on a Purina or an Old Roy and they're having some issues, but they're not as bad as I've seen, okay, let's get you off of corn and wheat first. Let's put you on a nice grain-friendly food, see if we see any difference. We'll counsel them about, you know, making sure you're looking at your treats as well.
Yeah.
Because if you're feeding, you know, say you're feeding From, but you're giving milk bones still, you might as well just toss that money that you're spending on it down the toilet.
Right.
There's no point.
Right. Absolutely.
So we'll usually do that first, and then if we continue to have problems, then we'll go grain-free, potato-free, look at protein sources, things like that.
Gotcha. What if you have a dog that's like having diarrhea, for example? So, and let's say this person is, let's say the dog's got diarrhea. The person is doing some of their own research. They get Purina.
Yep.
Their dog's good to go on the Purina, no diarrhea, but then maybe it's chewing its feet.
Right.
Right. So then they come to you. Maybe they switch to something else, but now it starts having diarrhea again. What are you doing in that situation?
Certainly. So a lot of times, what we'll do first and foremost is try to correct the gut flora. So we'll usually start a probiotic, whether it's bad diarrhea or not. We'll recommend it. I don't think it's always we have to do this or it won't. You know.
So you'll switch them from Purina to something else and
do
add
a
the
probiotic. Yep.
Okay.
But usually, say if they're on Purina and the dog's diarrhea seems to be doing okay, and we switch them to, say, we'll switch them to From.
Yeah.
Maybe like the Gold or the Classic, something that has some good grain content in it. And then we start having issues. So then we want to look a little more closely at the Purina, what they were feeding prior to the Purina, what they were feeding with the Purina, what they're feeding with the From. Oftentimes, I'll say, when I have a client that switches from something like Purina to From or something of that like, and they start to have diarrhea, it's usually because they're overfeeding, honestly. Because the body's first line of defense to get rid of nutrients that they don't need is going to be
Flush the
diarrhea.
system.
Yep, got to get rid of it.
Yeah,
That's the quickest way to do it.
Okay.
So we'll usually talk about portion control again.
Yep.
Because usually by this time we've already done it once, but we'll talk about it again. We'll switch up some things. Or we'll change the protein source again. It's really individualized, to be honest.
Right,
it really depends on what they've been feeding. I wish I could think of a really good example that I've dealt with recently.
I mean, it's the same thing with what we do with behavior. You know what I'm saying? It's individualized. We got our step-by-step process, our progression of how we're going to go from start to finish. But, you know, one dog may need a little adjustment there. Another dog may need a little adjustment down here.
Absolutely.
So we're just adjusting it to that individual dog. And that's where your expertise comes in, or ours in the behavior case, you know, that type of thing. You know what I'm saying? So basically, if someone's dealing with that, they need expert help to help them overcome that. You know what I'm saying? Or work through that a little bit.
Absolutely.
You know?
And, you know, and I mentioned Morgan earlier with his rice allergy. That is a very rare allergy. Very often do we see rice cause diarrhea in dogs, but for him, it was one of those things. And who would have thought that, you know?
Yeah.
We've had some dogs that come in and, you know, we recommend a fish-based diet because of their skin, but their stomachs can't handle it.
Right.
So we'll go to something that's maybe a little more of a novel protein, like lamb or duck or something like that, and that tends to help with the diarrhea issue as long as they're not overfeeding, things like that.
Gotcha.
So.
And a lot of times our two realms intertwine.
Absolutely.
You know, because the nutrition is key. You obviously want to make sure that's good, but if you're still having issues, it might be, let's say, diarrhea, for example. That could be an anxiety-related thing, and now you need a behavior help to overcome that. You know, so those two worlds kind of come together at some point as you're going through your troubleshooting process. You know?
And shedding, that's another thing that we'll see dogs that are shedding excessively.
Excessive shedding is nutrition, or I know it's
be
anxiety. You know, it could be anxiety, insecurity.
Fight or flight. Those fight or flight mechanisms, the adrenaline and whatnot, it causes the hair follicle to dilate, and then they release hair. And you know, that's one of the questions I ask if we've gone through the gambit with nutrition about, and as far as the shedding is concerned, I'm like, okay, you do have like a lab, but is this dog, you know, is this dog really excitable? Not just necessarily nervous, anxious, but is it really excitable at home?
Yeah.
Or, you know, does the dog jump at, you know, any little sound? maybe that's like a confidence issue. That's where the adrenaline is pumping, the hair follicles are dilated. We're going to release hair a lot more. So I completely agree with you on more than one platform there that our professions do intertwine.
Yeah.
So.
How can someone assess if their dog has an allergy other than like, pink skin? Hair falling out, like what kind of things are we looking for? I don't know what's going on with my dog. Something weird's going on.
Oh, definitely.
What could signal me to that?
So, oftentimes excessive licking, excessive chewing. Sometimes when you'll feel the skin, you'll feel like little crusty spots. Staph infections are really, really prevalent in this issue. Staph's a normal inhabitant of the skin. Of the skin. But at certain times the immune system has a hard time fighting it back, so that'll present as like pustules on the skin. You'll see hair loss or thinning hair in certain areas. Maybe the skin will be clammy. You might see discoloration of the skin. We oftentimes will see where the skin turns black, and that's just from constant yeast infections over time sometimes. Really a host of different things.
I've seen dogs where the skin turns black and it like flakes off.
Absolutely,
Is that
and that's
yeast-based usually.
Yeast and staph infections usually can, they go hand in hand. It's like which came first, the chicken or the egg. You don't know if it was the staph or the yeast that was making them itchy, and then they itched themselves more and made that microscopically opened up that skin, and now it's opportunistic bacteria. So. It is kind of one of those which came first, the chicken or the egg. So if you're seeing
any of this stuff, it's a good idea to look at the nutrition.
Absolutely.
Also anxiety. It could be anxiety based too.
Absolutely. Oh,
so
yeah.
Just look
People
at
have
it,
hives because of anxiety. Dogs can have hives because of anxiety or skin problems.
Right.
We don't often see like the swelling and stuff that people see with dogs that might be allergic to something, but I don't like to say that it can't happen because, really the body's response to stimuli is never ending. So.
Right. Absolutely. Good to go. Do you guys have anything to add on that or questions about that allergy related stuff? Good. Okay. Let's talk about raw diet, so give us a deep dive on the raw diet. We already talked about it's the best one. It goes back to the ancestral roots, all that kind of stuff. Talk about I know you guys have a lot of the options at your store. To just talk to us about some of the more common raw diets that someone could purchase versus going out and getting their own or making their own, you know what I'm saying?
So you do have commercially made or commercially available raw diets. Some of those brands are Stella and Chewy's, which we've talked about. Tucker's and Stella and Chewy's are probably my favorite raw diets that we sell right now. Okay. There's another brand called Small Batch that I've tried out. My little dachshund does really, really good on that. Steve's is another one. There's Primal. There's Answers. There are a plethora of raw diet companies.
Yep.
But I think it's important to touch on the schools of thought when it comes to raw. There are two different schools of thought. There's the school of thought that says that, dog food is not balanced unless it has the vitamin minerals added to it, like a supplement, or the fruits and vegetables. And then there's the school of thought that is the prey model, where it's pretty much 80% muscle meat, 10% bone, 5% liver, 5% other secreting organ, and that's all. You don't have supplemented vitamins and minerals. You don't have vegetable content. That's the one I tend to like a little bit more. Honestly, there's less fluff in it that the dogs could be allergic to. Tucker's is one of those that kind of blends both aspects of that. So you've got a lot of muscle meat, you've got a lot of organ content, bone, but it's still fortified with vitamins and minerals, and it's got a little bit of pumpkin for digestion, which I do like that. Yeah. Stella and Chewy's is still 95 to 98% meat and organ and bone, but then they've got that other, percentage of vitamins and minerals and fruits and vegetables. So it really just kind of goes back to what the dog does best with. For instance, Annette, Annette, my boss is, their dogs eat pretty much the prey model. They add extra liver, they add extra heart, especially with the breeds that they have. It's important that they get that taurine from the organ, as you would know, because you have a Doberman as well. But her dogs do very, very well on that. Now, Sam has a dog that we just moved over to a raw diet. Really? There's a little bit of pumpkin in it. He has some pretty severe skin allergies, and he's allergic to different protein sources like lamb. And we think he may be allergic to goat. He's allergic to venison. So these things that the vets are always pushing, you need to go to these foreign protein sources, those don't work for him.
Not always the case.
Exactly. You know, we just moved him. He's now on Tucker's. The pumpkin's doing well for him because we were a little worried about him with vomiting or loose stool or whatnot, because he's had things like that before, and he's doing phenomenally on his.
Yeah.
I have tons of clients that do well on Stella and Chewy's. It's more individualized.
Right.
But like I said, I do think it's important to touch that there are two different schools of thought, and I don't think that either one of them is right 100% of the time. I think, again, we have to think about the individual sitting in front of us.
We keep talking about adding some pumpkin in there too. Is it good to keep pumpkin in the diet for a long term, or is it like a short term here, like a rotation type thing?
So some people do it all the time and their dogs are fine with it. Some people just do it periodically when their dogs might have issues.
Goes back to the individual dog.
I think so. I don't think there's a right answer with that. Just like some people say, well, you can't feed coconut oil long term because it causes issue. I mean, too much of anything is a bad thing, you know?
Yeah. It's good to have some variety.
Absolutely. You know, I think personally, when it comes to oils and stuff in the diet, I like to do like a salmon oil over a coconut oil. Salmon is a protein source. It's meat. I think dogs digest animal products better than they digest plant products.
Right.
That doesn't mean that there's not a great use for coconut oil with some of these dogs that may be also doing salmon oil.
Gotcha.
But, and I'm sorry, I feel like I went off on a tangent
you're
again.
good. Yeah.
But see, I'm the queen
We like
of
the
tangents.
tangents. Me and you both.
Yes. But as far as the raw diet is concerned, I think, like I said, I don't think that there's one right answer.
Right.
But I think the pumpkin definitely helps with fiber with some of those dogs.
Okay.
Because that is the big problem with raw diets is some dogs if you're trying to franken-prey it or you're doing your own prey model, if you add too much liver, it's highly likely you're going to get diarrhea. Whereas if you add too much bone, you're going to get this very crumbly, dry-looking stool. So that's why, again, it's important to look at your dog's poop.
Yeah.
But I think that different dogs are going to function well at other. You know, with Olive, the boss's dog, if she doesn't get more liver in her diet than the average dog, she does have that crumbly poop. So that's just one example of it really depending on the dog.
Gotcha. Let's go back and touch on that. We've kind of gone through kibble, through raw. Let's go back and talk about what could someone that's maybe wanting to get a better nutrition or diet for their dog, you know, let's say they're getting a quality kibble versus a quality raw, you know, whether that be, you know, more meat-based or a little bit of mix there. What are they talking about for their budget, you know, per month? What could they, let's say they have a 50-pound dog.
Certainly.
What could you estimate budget-wise per month they could be looking at to allocate for that higher level diet?
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
So say we're looking at, say let's look at raw first. For instance, the Tucker's raw food is about... Whitney's going to kill me because I can't remember. I want to say it's like around $33.99.
Okay.
I think I got it exactly on the nose. Yay me.
All right.
It's around $33.99, and that is there's 12 patties in a package, and that's a 6-pound package. So each patty is a half a pound. For instance, with Hugo, Sam's dog, we just ended up doing, we're doing 1 patty twice a day for him. She's going to kill me, but she knows where she is with this. She likes her dogs a little heavier than I like mine.
Yeah.
So we're working it back, trying to get a little weight off of him, just because he is aging and they are in an apartment setting where he has to go up and down stairs and whatnot.
Yep.
So we're doing 1 patty twice a day for him. Now that bag of patties is only going to last him 6 days.
Yeah.
So we're looking at $33.99 pretty much a week.
Yeah.
So you're looking at what, 120
a month.
Yeah, 120 a month.
That's not bad.
For raw feeding.
Yeah.
Now, on a bag of kibble, say we go with a 25-pound bag of kibble. That's the biggest bag of kibble. For him, for his weight, for a 50-pound dog, let's say we're going to say a cup and a half a day. That 25-pound bag of kibble is probably going to last 2 months, and it's going to range anywhere from, say we're looking at the Acana, $63.99 to $72.99 for a bag pre-tax.
Okay.
So, but that 25-pound bag is going to last her 2 months.
Right.
So it's definitely a little less cost prohibitive to go with a kibble than it is to go with a raw.
Right. And it's more convenient for most people, you know, that kind of stuff.
It is.
Just so some people have some, you know, rough estimate of,
Absolutely.
you know.
But that doesn't mean that you can't blend the two either. There's also, you know, there's a faction of people that say that you can't feed raw and kibble together.
Right.
I just don't agree with that at all. I think the body is smart enough to break it down.
So you can mix it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we eat protein and vegetable content at the same time. The body is going to break down the raw a little more quickly than it is the kibble, but the body is smart enough to break it down. I don't think we give our bodies or the dog bodies credit for everything.
So you could implement mainly a kibble diet, insert some raw
Absolutely.
to get the health benefit of that, or the
Absolutely.
better benefit
or even
of
the
that.
palatability. You know, a lot of dogs there are dogs that love the raw. They love that raw meat. And I'm going to get a little into it. They love that blood. I mean, they are carnivores. They are meat eaters. They like that. And then there are some
good
dogs.
Bloody steak too, you know.
Let me tell you, give me a rare steak any day. Oh, don't cook my steak. No. But then you get those dogs that they don't like the texture. They don't like that it's cold.
Yeah.
That's where the freeze dried comes in handy for those dogs if you want to give them a little bit more palatability, but they don't like the texture or they don't like that it's cold. Let's give them some freeze dried or give them some. They have dehydrated diets now that aren't raw, but they aren't completely 100% cooked. So you've got those as well.
Nice. So you got options.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both.
Gotcha.
We have clients that, cook for their dogs as well, but they also lead with a nice high quality kibble, but then they'll, crock pot some stuff. I think that's great too. I'm also not one of these people that says, oh, your dog can't eat table food because it's people food. Well, what do you think we're making the kibble out of? It's all people food. It's all food, We just have to be smart about what we give them. If we're giving them spaghetti and meatballs, that's probably not the best thing to give them.
How about French fries?
Let's say no French fries. But
Big Mac?
No. I only I only condone that. Like, okay, when we had to put Smokey down, he got him a Big Mac.
You got a Big Mac before he went down.
Of course, that's yes.
That's understandable.
Well, we don't do that for birthdays either, but we'll make a patty of something and put a candle in it.
Absolutely.
It's fine.
But also, if you are feeding table scraps, maybe be careful of the seasonings or whatever else you use, because that could mess up the GI
and
too.
Sauces.
You need
Definitely
to keep it simple.
Careful. Yep.
Keep it simple.
Absolutely.
If you're going to do that. So.
Absolutely. And make sure if you're going to add some table food, let's cut back on the kibble some.
There you go.
Yep.
And from a behavior perspective, no jumping on the table, no begging at the table. It's on your terms.
Yep.
Exactly. So anyway, all right. So let's kind of wrap this up. There's been a lot going on with the DCM.
Yes.
So kind of touch on that. Tell us what it is.
Right.
Kind of go through. I know you've talked to a lot of people about this, so kind of give us.
I feel like it's all I've talked about for the past year or so.
Give us the quick and easy on it. What's going on? What's the real deal? Because the FDA is coming out with some new stuff. Oops.
Yep,
it wasn't the grain. It wasn't the grains. It wasn't the grain free. It was. We don't know.
Absolutely.
So kind of touch on that.
Yep. So DCM is dilated cardiomyopathy. It's pretty much the heart dilates or gets larger. For most breeds, it's a genetic disease. Now, the big concern that had arisen was that there were breeds of dogs where it wasn't traditionally thought to be a genetic a disease that were getting DCM and then dying as a result of that. So this one vet, the way it all started, this one vet pretty much took a single litter of golden retrievers and fed half of the litter grain-free, half of the litter a grained food, and one half of the litter got DCM, the other half didn't. Well, what this vet, and I'm sure that he went on and tested more dogs and more breeds from there. But the problem was golden retrievers are definitely a breed that DCM is prevalent in that breed. So pretty much in my eyes, all he proved was that particular lineage had DCM in the lines. What they've said over time is that the grain content, or the peas, the lentils, the potatoes in the grain-free foods were blocking the absorption or the synthesis of taurine. So taurine has never been considered an essential amino acid to be put in dog food because it is something that the dog could then synthesize from the other amino acids that were in the food. So there's never been anything to say, okay, you have to have this much taurine in the food, or it's considered an inadequate food. So now when all these studies came out with these specific breeds coming down with DCM or whatnot, they started looking at grain-free foods a little more wholly. But the truth is if out of upwards of 80 million dogs in the U.S. at any given time. They only had about 500 documented cases of DCM, regardless of breed, where the dogs had DCM, and I think maybe had perished. And I do apologize if that wasn't exactly correct. But really, we're looking at like a very minute percent of the population that they were kind of concerned about. So we have this very low percentage of dogs, 500 cases, and I think some of those were actually disproved to be, or rather it was still DCM, but it wasn't a taurine deficient DCM. So what they were trying to say is that the grain, or I'm sorry, not the grains, the peas, the lentils, potatoes were blocking the absorption of the taurine or the synthesis. So as long as the taurine is provided in the food, or the other amino acids that the dogs could then use to convert those into taurine were used, and 99.999% of the canine population was fine with that, we can't really blame that on a food. That was pure genetics or something physiologically wrong with the dog. Maybe it was something congenital, something developed in utero that would cause these dogs to not be able to break down the taurine or absorb the taurine or synthesize the taurine from the food. But that taurine will cause or the lack of taurine will cause things like heart issues, vision issues in cats, like we touched on earlier. So that was the big thing is if we are feeding foods that are essentially killing dogs, we need to look at that. And I do agree with that. But I think that their warnings were a little misguided because I don't think and this has been going on for 4 years now, and in 4 years they have yet to isolate any kind of causative link. And I think it was just last week the FDA came out and said, like you said, oops, we're wrong. Oops. There's not a significant risk. And what I've told people, one of my arguments against raw grain-free foods causing DCM is, I know of a lady, and I'll make this quick, I promise. Maybe.
No, you're good.
But I know of a lady who was breeding Siberian Huskies, okay? And that's my breed, so I pay a lot of attention to it. She was breeding Merle Siberian Huskies. Now, Merle is not a color that is genetically possible in the Siberian Husky. They don't have that gene to have Merle dogs. So that pretty much was proof that this dog was of impure breeding, but she was parading it around as a purebred Siberian Husky, charging exorbitant amounts of money for the offspring because they carried the Merle gene. Well, as we know with Merle dogs, there are disease or conditions that go hand in hand with Merle dogs. Like the lethal white gene, you breed two Merle dogs together, you're going to get, very nicely marked dogs, but you're going to get, maybe deafness, blindness, organ failure, things like that. So let's just say, for argument's sakes, that this DCM gene goes along with that Merle gene. And while DCM was never prevalent in the Siberian Husky gene pool, now we've introduced Siberian Huskies that have this specific gene. So now it looks like a breed that was never predisposed to DCM now has DCM. And how does it have that? And 98% of veterinarians know nothing about color genetics when it comes to Siberian Huskies, or really breeds in general. Unless they take an active interest in a specific breed, they're not going to know that, there can't be a Merle Siberian Husky. Heck, half the vets that I've known, oh, your dog doesn't have blue eyes, it must not be a pure Husky. That's not true.
Well, breeding is so complicated for a legit breeder. It's so complicated.
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm saying? That there's so many people that aren't doing it legit.
No, and it's a very lucrative business.
And it's bad. Now. So anyway, sorry to
go
off on a tangent.
No. But that was just my argument. So if we have breeders who are taking advantage of people and are breeding impure dogs that are opening up this gene pool now for these problems, and then we have veterinarians who really don't know a whole lot about these breeds and their genetic traits as a whole, then of course it's going to look as if this breed that had never had DCM before now has DCM, and why is that? So that was just one of my examples that I use to say, okay, well, I don't think they're kind of looking at this from all standpoints. I do think that we need to provide foods that are lower carb, that don't have, all the potato, all the peas in there, because a lot of foods will use pea protein as a source of protein, and that's, again, padding your protein. It's not a greatly soluble source of protein, but that is just an example of why. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Very good.
That happens sometimes.
Happens to all of us.
Yeah. It happens at work too. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll come back to it, I promise. But God, I've done so good. I don't know. I'll figure that out in a minute. But as far as
how the plant protein, or how the DCM is not really affected by
the
food, lack of grain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was my thing too, is they're saying, well, you need to have a little bit of grain in that to protect you from DCM. Mm-hmm. But those grain foods still have the peas, still have the potato, and they have a lower meat content, which tells me that there's less taurine in it, because taurine comes from meat. Yes, you can get the other amino acids from the grain content and whatnot, but you're not getting the taurine from the grains. You're getting taurine from meat, from organ content. So that's what it never really made a whole lot of sense to me if you look at it from a logical standpoint. And again, 500 cases out of 80 million dogs in the U.S. If grain-free foods were causing this, DCM, we would have seen it in pandemic proportions like we did with the coronavirus, and we would have seen it it would have been a bigger deal in other countries, and it hasn't been, because it's not.
Right.
It's not caused by.
So what I'm hearing you say is, basically, if we stick to the principles that you already touched on as we've gone through this whole discussion, look back at the ancestral roots, primarily get that meat-based diet in, it's going to cover us, because
Absolutely.
Even if our dogs are susceptible to whatever, DCM, whatever, if we're trying to fight that by going with what, people that haven't done that much research are saying, and we're reducing meat, we're reducing grain, or we're increasing grain and that kind of stuff, then that sets us up for trouble, because we're not really satisfying that dog's instinctual or individual
Absolutely.
need.
And we're going to set ourselves up for other issues later on.
Right.
So
like for us, humans, we need those carbs, we need that energy, good carbs, clean carbs, what I'm saying. But for dogs, they're different, they're not a human.
And I'm not going to say that they don't need the carbs,
right,
but
not like we do.
But
though,
not like we do. We
yeah.
don't, and their GI is so much shorter than ours. They're not going to utilize it in the way that we would.
Right.
So you're
Gotcha.
right.
Good to go. So do you guys have any questions on that stuff, DCM, anything like that?
It's a lot to digest.
It's a lot to digest. But I just saw last week, like we talked about, FDA came out. Sorry, we misspoke.
Yep.
It's not linked to the grain thing. We're still trying to figure it out. Typical government. So.
Yep. And I'm not even gonna lie. I felt very vindicated when that came out, because I'm like, ha!
Yeah.
Been telling you the whole time.
Yeah.
Happy dance.
Absolutely.
So
all right. But last question for
Yes.
you, or last thing, if we haven't anything you wanted to touch on.
No, I think we
let me know.
touched on everything. I just
But-
want to make sure I answered all your questions.
So I'm a big proponent on, I like my dogs enjoying stuff, like little treats here and there, like bully sticks.
Yeah.
Can you give us some of the best things for our dogs to be chewing on?
Absolutely.
What, because rawhide's out there.
Yeah.
We know that's going to mess up, just going to tear them up on the inside. So
Absolutely.
what are some good alternatives for our dogs?
Certainly.
And that they can enjoy as like a
Oh, yeah.
treat, when we're hanging out or something like that.
Absolutely. Body parts. I love to feed my dogs body parts. And I know that sounds really, really weird. I mean, I'm not going out and chopping up the mailman or anything.
I was about to say.
But this whole rawhide became a big thing because people wanted something inexpensive to give their dogs to chew on that lasted a while. But the problem is it's a bunch of different animal parts and pieces that are boiled down and usually compressed under high pressure. So what happens when it gets in the gut? Well, it reabsorbs that water, and now it swells. So that's dangerous. We have something at work that's a cheek roll, and those are actually becoming a little more available from other companies as well. Like when we first started with the cheek rolls, it was only available by this one company called Crygen. But now there are more companies bringing out these cheek rolls, and it's literally a cow's cheek that they've rolled up on itself and dried. So it appears to be rawhide, but it's not rawhide.
Yeah.
It doesn't swell. If you soak it in a bowl of water, it feels just like wet skin.
Yeah.
Put some
Nice.
soap on it,
Nice.
wash it, But so that's wonderful. I love bones. We call them the GI bones, but they're pretty much the long bones that have the marrow in the middle.
Yep.
I like to give my dogs raw ones, but there are also slow roasted bones. Typically, you don't want to do cooked bones over raw bones because raw bones are much more malleable. They don't splinter. But what I tell people is the bones that you buy that are specifically for pets are slowly roasted over days so that it doesn't compromise the integrity of the bone, so they're not going to splinter like that.
Gotcha.
So bones are great. I also, my dogs, once they get all the marrow out of it and all the good stuff off of it, then you can stuff it with like peanut butter, yogurt, banana, things like that. Freeze it. And what I tell people is it kind of extends the life of your bone, so to speak.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about, feed the dog that you're working with. So if you've got, a 90-pound German Shepherd, you don't necessarily want to go with a pork bone, because pork bones are, pigs are big, yes. Cows are bigger. Their bones are not necessarily, cow bones are a little more strong than the pig bones are. So like we have pig femur bones at work. I might have somebody with a pit bull or a lab or something come up and they want to get those for their dogs, but that jaw tone is so much stronger than it is, say, for like, a Cocker Spaniel or something like that.
Yeah.
A cow bone would be a much more suitable bone for a bigger dog over the pork bones. Those are things that might last a little bit longer. If you're like me, I like to give my dogs things that last, but I also like to give them something that they might be able to chew up a little more quickly.
Right.
That's where the cow ears and the pig snouts and things like that, the bully sticks come into play there. And every dog is going to chew up things at a different rate. My largest dog that I had, Morgan, it would take him a week to go through a bully stick, whereas the dachshund, it would take her 30 minutes, Every dog is different. Feed that dog that's in front of you. Antlers, we've recently gotten our hands on some moose antlers, and they're really big and really cool. But antlers are something now, 50% of dogs are going to like antlers, another 50% are going to hate antlers. They might leave them. It just really depends on the dog, but that's a great long-term chew.
Now, does this chewing, I know I've talked to Annette about this, but it's good to clean their teeth as well.
Absolutely.
Are there some things that are better for teeth cleaning? Because a lot of people get the greenies.
Oh, yeah. And so dental chews have a place in your dental care regimen when it comes to chewing and stuff, but they should never be the end-all be-all. Historically, dental chews literally last several minutes, if that.
If that, yeah.
So they really need to have that mechanical scrubbing and chewing to really help with the teeth. And it's also going to, as you know, it's going to help their mental abilities as well. So, I'm not a big greenie fan because I don't like Nutro, and Nutro makes greenies, and they have recalls or backdoor recalls. It's not a company that I like, but those dental chews like that should be a part of your chewing and dental care regimen, but never the end all be all. I like to, if today I'm doing a bully stick, tomorrow I might do a dental chew, or maybe I'll do a cow ear, but then they've always got their knuckle bones or their other bones available that they can go to at all times.
So anything that they have to actively chew on is going to help keep that dental health as clean as possible.
Mechanical scrubbing and chewing is important.
Okay, gotcha.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Good to go. Well, is there anything else you wanted to touch on that we missed?
I don't think
There's
so.
a lot of information out there.
There's a lot of information. No, I think we touched on everything that I feel that's important for anybody starting out, and and if anybody ever has questions, all they have to do is
where can they come?
Yep, they can always come to see me at All Is Well. We're right on Trolley Road in Summerville.
Now, there's different All Is Wells out there. There's
there were
3 of them.
There were. Now, the other All Is Wells have changed their name to the Wild.
Okay.
We weren't ever really.
Better for you guys.
Yeah, it's definitely better for us. We like our name. We wanted to keep it. But and I'm sure that they do a great job with what they do as well.
But the All Is Well Summerville is where you're at.
That's where I'm at.
Yep. That's
and
where
I'd be
you
more
guys
than happy to answer questions.
You're talking about it, and someone doesn't. This is something someone walks into your store, you just talk to them, you or Annette or whoever is talking to them right then and there.
Absolutely.
It's like a complimentary thing.
Yep, there's never any charge for our
recommendations. Because you care about the dog, you care about the people.
Absolutely.
And you're going to steer them to the right stuff, and you're only carrying the things in the store that are, from y'all's perspective and from y'all's research and all that, the best for the dog.
Absolutely.
Right?
Trustworthy companies.
Right.
We'll only sell companies that we completely trust, that we would stand behind, that we would feed our own dogs. If we wouldn't feed it to our dogs, it's not going to be in the store.
Right.
So.
And y'all also do grooming, and you have a self-serve dog wash.
Absolutely.
You got nice leashes and slip leads. That's where we get our slip leads from. So
you get the Mendota?
Yep.
I love the Mendota. I just ordered a bunch more of those.
Nice.
But I joke around and say the dog wash is why I actually have a job there. Because several years ago, I've been there 11 years now, but 11 years ago, whenever I started shopping there, I would come in, and Christina worked on Thursdays, and I'd spend 2 hours there talking to her every other Thursday, and then we created a friendship, and they offered me a job, and I'm so glad I took this job.
Oh yeah,
I love this job so much better than
what
I did.
Oh yeah, too,
absolutely, and it's family.
Yeah,
we're always family oriented. We look at our clients like their family. When they lose a dog, it upsets us because those dogs are our family too.
I've been in the store before when you got a phone call and someone was like saying, "Oh, I won't need my grooming appointment anymore because so and so passed away," and I could just tell that everybody in there was seriously impacted by that. That's how much you guys care about your customers.
Oh, absolutely. And then when our customers get new puppies, we had a customer who had a boxer who came to us every 2 weeks for years, and unfortunately she lost him this year. But she just came back in and she got her new boxer puppy, and we were so excited. And we had to cart that puppy to the back, and everybody had to love on the puppy. So I mean, it really it takes a village to raise a kid. It takes a village to raise a dog too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So. And then for police canines, right? Y'all let them come in,
absolutely.
Use the dog wash.
Free dog wash, free nail trims. 98% of the time, the handler has to be there with them.
Put a muzzle on them, lock them in handler.
Absolutely,
good to go.
Absolutely. We even have done some free grooming for some of the canine officers that either couldn't do it themselves or didn't want to do it themselves. We supply food for a lot of for several of the stations around. So I know is it Summerville?
Summerville, I think, and Dorchester.
And Summerville, and is it Summerville? I know I think we supply food for one of the Charleston County canines too.
Gotcha.
So we do a lot with.
So you're supporting our law enforcement community and all that. And then also rescues too. You guys are heavily involved in.
Oh yes.
You have rescues come out to your place for their adopting.
Yeah, that's unfortunately been a little slower because of COVID and everything. Right. But yes, we'll have adoption events at the shop. We have this thing that we call our Spotlight Rescue, and we have cans that are either that are just no longer popular cans that we have, or they're slightly out of date or going out of date and they need to be used soon. We actually offer those for the public to buy for the rescue, the Spotlight Rescue of that time period. They'll buy them at a 50% discount, and then they don't have to pick it up at the store and bring it to us or bring it to the rescue. We take it out, or we have somebody from one of the rescues or the shelters come and get it. So
awesome. If someone's coming by the store, they want to donate to a rescue, they can do that right there.
Absolutely. Bring it to us.
We'll get one of the products, send it to, or put it in your rack for the rescue. Good to go.
Yeah, and we'll take, if they've got towels or anything like that, we'll take those towels, beds, toys, collars, leashes, anything that they want to get rid of, we'll take that for the rescues as well.
Yeah.
And we just divvy it up. Whoever we're collecting for that week, they pretty much get it's their luck, unless somebody says specifically this is for HF Help or this is for Dorchester Paws or something like that. Okay. So,
Now, if someone comes in there, they're talking about nutrition, all that. Let's say now they want to get involved in the grooming. Y'all do have a long wait list, I'm pretty sure, for the grooming.
We do.
You have a process to get them on your books?
We do. Right now with the holidays, this is the busiest time of year for groomers. Truthfully, we're kind of booked up until after the holidays, but after the holidays, we are going to explore accepting new clients again.
Gotcha.
In the past, we've done waiting lists, but it tends to, people get forgotten or people change their numbers and then they call back. Well, I never received a phone call. So what we're just asking our clients to do right now is call back first or second week of January, and hopefully we can get them in.
Gotcha.
With our current clients, if they've had to miss an appointment for some reason, or they didn't, oh my gosh, the family's coming in, we didn't think ahead to get the dog groomed, we've got a cancellation list for current clients. We always take recommendations. Yes, ma'am? Okay, that's fine. You'll be fine. Sit down. We always take recommendations from, our colleagues like you guys or some of the vets that we work with in the area. We'll always take recommendations from them, and we always refer out. But right now, we won't put, we'd love to be able to take everybody, but we're really particular about the girls that we hire to work with the dogs. They have to have certain caliber of grooming. They have to treat the dogs nicely. They have to, talk to them. You know, we've had groomers that have come in and auditioned, and they're just very robotic, and you know, they don't talk to them. And sometimes these dogs need to be reassured. You know, not saying that they all need to be coddled, but they do need to be reassured with the grooming process. So because we're really picky about our, you know, who we employ, and we're really picky about not overworking the girls, and also making sure that every dog gets the adequate amount of attention that they deserve. We do have, you know, we do fill up rather quickly because of that, and most of our clients have recurring schedules where they come every 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks.
Right.
So we book up quickly because of that, and if I can't keep my girls, or if we can't keep our girls, you know, with steady work, then they're going to find that work elsewhere. So
absolutely.
But yeah, anybody who wants to try to get in with us for grooming, which we do use, you know, all natural grooming supplies, keeping with our, you know,
and Annette
holistic.
And Christina made some of those
Absolutely,
grooming shampoos and stuff.
Groomer's
They
Secret
came
is
up
their
with that
is their
themselves,
brainchild.
right?
Yeah.
So.
And it's a soap, dye, detergent, paraben, lanolin, perfume-free shampoo, conditioner, after bath spray. There's even some something called Derm Ease that works for hot spots. I mean, we use it on the kids. And everything. So like the literal two-legged children.
So
I
think I used that on a couple of my dog bites when I got bit here and there.
I swear this thumb actually grew back normal because of Derm Ease. I've been bitten through both of my thumbnails actually. So
Bill's character, little dog bite.
Yep.
Good to go.
But
I know people, you know, that we work with, I'm always talking about, I always tell them, hey, you know, especially if they're sent their dog to training and they bring the old Roy, I'm like, all right, we got to get you on the right diet. You know, you got to go see Blair and Annette and Christina over at all as well. So a lot of our people come over there as well.
And we do appreciate that. And likewise, we send a lot of people y'all's way because honestly, what you guys do is the best. So
well, y'all are doing the best. And like you said, our two worlds are closely interrelated because some of the things that we see could be anxiety. Some things you see, it's an allergy. So those two worlds have to be in close connection with each other.
Absolutely. And I feel like we all need to work together anyway as a team for the betterment of these dogs. Because, I mean, dogs are pretty awesome. We should all be so lucky to be a dog one day, you know?
But anyway, we really appreciate you coming out. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
If anybody's listening to this, one of our listeners, one of our viewers, if you have a question, you know, put it in the comments below. Might have Blair out on another podcast if, you know, everyone's got more questions, more things they need her to cover because she is an expert. She's got so much information, you know, it's hard to pull it out of her in an hour, you know what I'm saying? So we're just barely brushing the surface.
Let me tell you, I can talk now.
So good to go. But anyway, awesome. Thanks for coming out, Blair. And go see her at all as well. Summerville, Old Trolley Road. And good to go. There's a nice restaurant right down the road, Dog and Duck. Good to go. So
take your dog.
We just went there. Maybe not. So
it's pretty yummy.
But anyway, all right, guys. Thanks for listening. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments below. Go see Blair and the team over at All as well. And we'll see y'all next time.